He says their argument is completely a lie. The American Revolution, the argument by Wesley argued completely a lie. And then his successor, there's another work here, successor to Wesley was John Fletcher. And let's read this. A vindication of the Reverend Mr. Wesley's calm address to our American colonies, which we just read, in some letters to Mr. Caleb Evans by John Fletcher, vicar of Madeley, Solo. And Wesley's quote, or Fletcher's quote here is, as free and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as the servants of God, honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. While they promise you liberty, they themselves are the servants of corruption. We're going to Iraq, promising people liberty and democracy, but we ourselves are slaves of corruption. Our soldiers are probably some of the most wicked soldiers that people have ever seen. I mean, they're wicked. Look, I mean, how many Christians are actually amongst our soldiers? Very few. Listen to the music they listen to. You see the words that come out of their mouths. Look at these men, these products of our public schools. They are wicked. Now, how can wicked men produce a good thing? I don't see it. Look where America's at. Look at the World War II soldiers. Were they not wicked? Look at their morality. It gets worse and worse. After the American Revolution, hardly anybody was going to church. These wars produced wickedness. Of course, the morality was much better under George Washington's troops, but the morality that's under our soldiers in Iraq, have you ever looked into what they believe, what their morality is, when they're, just look how they behave. They listen to the most wicked music, wicked words always coming out of their mouths. Their morals they're disgusting by any Christian standard. This is where we're at, and we're gonna give, that's liberty. They promised them liberty. We're over there promising Iraq liberty, but they themselves are slaves of corruption. And you look at most of those soldiers, and can you that they're slaves of corruption. They're corrupt. The whole government's corrupt. It's corrupt everywhere. And the Christian is to come out from among them and be separate. And that's why the bishop of the Roman Catholic bishop, or the Catholic bishop of Canton, Ohio, and Fred Phelps, the Baptist preacher, are saying very strong, it's a deadly sin to be involved in the war in Iraq. Do you think they're wrong? Here is Fletcher defending Wesley's position. And Fletcher wrote a couple things dealing with this issue. Let's read something about Fletcher. An outstanding writer, Fletcher became a leading Methodist theologian. For although he did not follow the itinerant pattern of the Wesleys, Fletcher was one of the founders of the Wesleyan movement. He became vicar of Madeley, of Shropshire in 1760 and spent his life in that hard region. He was for a time superintendent of Selina, the Countess of Huntington's College of Trevecca in Wales. He resigned when his Arminian views clashed with Lady Huntington's strict Calvinism. Comparing him with George Whitefield, the leading preacher of his time, George Whitefield, John Wesley declared Fletcher to be superior in holy tempers and holiness of conversation. Indeed, Wesley claimed that Fletcher had never met so holy a man as John Fletcher, and never expected to do so this side of eternity. Other contemporaries seem to have shared this assessment of Fletcher's saintliness. The Bible and the Sword, 1776. This is an article Fletcher wrote. Reflects the Wesleyan view of the righteousness of the British in suppressing the American rebellion. God was on England's side. Fletcher also wrote a vindication of the Reverend Mr. Wesley's column address. And this is a long article that Fletcher writes defending Wesley's position that the Americans were in total revolt against God. The leader of the Methodist Church, Wesley, in total revolt against God. Fletcher, considered by many to be one of the most godliest of men, total revolt against God. So what you have here is you have the Arminians versus the Calvinists. The Calvinists were saying, this is all right, this revolt. Let's look at what Fletcher says here. Thankful for the religious and civil liberty which I enjoy as a subject of Great Britain, persuaded that many warm, well-meaning men mistake an unreasonable opposition to the king and the minister for true patriotism. True patriotism would cause you to rebel against the king. But the word patria means father. The king is like a father. How could you be a patriot by rebelling against the father? It'd be like children saying, I'm the true patriot. We come against our father. Fletcher writes, sensible of the sad consequences of national misunderstanding, ardently wishing that all things may be so ordered and settled upon the best and surest foundations, which, if I mistake not, are reason, Scripture, and our excellent Constitution, that peace and harmony may for all generations be established between Great Britain and her flourishing colonies, and desirous to inspire you, sir, he's writing this to an opponent of Wesley, and my dissatisfied dissenting brethren with the same loyal sentiments, I take the pen to expostulate with you about the system of politics which you recommend to the public in your letter to the Reverend Mr. Wesley, occasioned by his column address to the American colonies. In other words, a person is opposing Wesley, and Wesley now is Fletcher is now taking on Wesley's opponent. It is at this time particularly needful to throw light upon the question debated between Mr. Wesley and you. For if you are in the right, the sovereign, King George, is a tyrant. Taxing the colonists is robbery, and enforcing such taxation by the sword is murder, which is what the colonists claimed. And if the colonists are right, we ought to celebrate 4th of July as a great thing. If Wesley is right, and Fletcher is right, the British are right, 4th of July we ought to be in sackcloth and ashes, confessing total rebellion against God. Fletcher writes, we cannot hold up the hands of our soldiers by prayer without committing sin. We can't uphold the hands of our British soldiers by prayer without committing sin. Nor can they fight with Christian courage, which is inseparable from a good conscience, if they suspect that they are sent to rob good men of their properties, liberties, and lives. Mr. Wesley asserts that the supreme power in England has a legal right of laying any tax upon the American colonies for any end beneficial to the whole empire, with or without their consent. And you reply, if the Americans are indeed subject to such a power as this, their condition differs not from that of the most abject slaves in the universe. They didn't want to be slaves. Did Jesus complain about being a slave? No, he says he became a slave and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. And he says, you want to be my followers, you must also become slaves to others and to God. So what's the problem? Did the American colonists were they influenced by the Masons who worship Lucifer? Were they influenced by the Masons? John Quincy Adams says half of the people are Masons. Half the people in government, local, state, and federal, Masons. And who are the Masons? Well, people that are astute observers of it, the Catholic Church says they worship Lucifer. Therefore, no Catholic could ever be a Mason. Ever. Sir, I venture to assert that you are mistaken and that Mr. Wesley's proposition is rational, scriptural, and constitutional. In promising you to show in another letter the absurdity of your proposition, I enter upon the proof of my assertion by an appeal to reason, scripture, and your own letter. In following this method, I shall address you as a man, a divine, and a controvertist. First, as a man. Here's the argument. See, the foundation upon which this country was built is the American Revolution. King George was a tyrant. We hate Saddam Hussein. He was a tyrant. And we're determined to eliminate all tyrants from the earth. Fletcher writes, does your mistake spring from your inattention to the nature of civil government? You represent the power which the king and parliament claim of disposing of some of the money of the colonists without their consent, as an encroachment upon British liberty, as an unjust tyrannical pretension, nay, as a species of robber. So the king was robbing them of 14%. Well, how about our government today robbing us of about 50%? That's fine, right? But did you never consider, sir, that in the nature of things our sovereign, I mean by this word, the king and his parliament, first jointly making laws not contrary to the laws of God, whose supreme dominion must always be submitted to by all created lawgivers, and secondly, executing the laws which have been made by imparting to magistrates and other officers of justice a sufficient power to put them in force. But did you never consider, I say, that our sovereign, whether we have a vote for parliament, men or not, has both a right and a power to dispose not only of our money, but also of our liberty and life, so far as that disposal answers ends agreeable to the law of God, beneficial to the peace of society, and conducive to the general good. If this political doctrine is explained, you will, I am persuaded, assent to it as an indubitable truth. Could the sovereign rule and protect us if he had not this right and this power? See, apply this to the father in the home. See, we're stripping the father, just like we wanted to strip King George of his authority, we've stripped the father in the home of this. And do we have order in our homes? Do we have godly order in our homes? Do we have godly children being raised around the country? No. If we did, you wouldn't have most parents afraid to let their kids out of the house. But most parents are afraid to let their children even out of the home because people out there are so wicked. Well, why are they wicked? Because they're rebels. Because they don't obey their fathers. Because the fathers have had their power authority stripped from them. And you have the mothers running the homes, and the mothers can't control the kids.